Hello, welcome everyone joining. It is 10 o'clock, so I've opened the doors and let everyone in and we'll get started. I expect a few more people will join us as we go along, which is fine. Oh yeah, I can see a few more people joining already. Brilliant. Okay, so hello everyone. If I haven't met you before, my name is Amy and I'd like to welcome you this morning to this Church Urban Fund webinar. So before we begin, just a little bit of housekeeping for us. This session is being recorded, but don't worry, your faces won't be visible on the recording if you do speak. We'll be sending the recording around to you afterwards, so that you'll have that to refer back to, and you can send it to anyone else who might find it useful. And we'll also pop it on our website, so you can find it there as well. Now, if you've got any questions as we go along, please feel free to ask them. The best way to do that will be using the chat button. So you should be able to see a button that says chat, possibly with a little speech bubble sign, probably at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer, maybe somewhere else if you're joining from a tablet or a phone. If you just click that, you can type your questions as we go. There's no such thing as a stupid question, anything, just ask away, and we'll come to them at the end, and Hannah, who's leading our session today, will happily answer them for you. So thank you very much again for joining us. We hope this is going to be really useful to you in some way, you and your church. And this webinar is the second webinar in a series of 5, all designed for churches to help you, equip you, inspire you, and just help you really as you engage with your communities and do the wonderful work that you do. This one is part of a series of 5, as I said, that are all linked to the Growing Good themes. Now, Growing Good, you might have heard of. It's Church Urban Fund's free 6-session course that helps churches to explore the connections between social action, discipleship, and growth. So we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. We'll hear from Polly about Growing Good and if that might be a good thing for your church as well. So now I'd like to introduce you to Hannah Fleming-Hill. So Hannah's going to be leading us through today's session this morning. And we're very grateful to have her with us because she is extremely knowledgeable and helpful when it comes to anything to do with the online world. So over to you, Hannah. Thank you so much.
Oh no, that's like no pressure then for that introduction. Well, it's great to be here today. We will be looking at getting your church online. Now, I have on my notes, big, bold, 30 minutes of talking. So there is so much more that I could touch on, could expand on, could just go on random reflections on, but I will try and keep it concise. So as Amy said, if there is anything that doesn't make sense, either make a note to ask at the end or ask it in the chat. I will also be giving out my email and contact details. So if there is anything that you want to follow up on, please feel free to. So to give you a little bit of an introduction to who I am, as Amy said earlier, my name is Hannah. I live on, and I'd like to normally say the sunny South Coast. It's not, it's very drizzly today. So it's still though the lovely South Coast. I live with my husband and my rescue French bulldog, who is sitting in my office with me. So if you hear any snorting or the occasional woof, that is the dog. But he's very lovely. I'm a digital missioner and comms consultant, working with churches, charities, and organizations in helping to understand how we can use social media and the online world for good. I'm doing an MA in digital theology at Spurgeon's College. I love sea swimming, walks out in nature, and loose leaf tea. And you can find me online on most social media platforms on @thehannahfh, or you can find my sort of work stuff through FH Digital. So going now. So I'm going to try not to speak too fast because I get very excited and want to just fill in as much as I can in the time. So thinking about online, I think what is a really good way to start is to think about the opportunities that we have with using online. As Jesus gave the Great Commission to the disciples, it is still so applicable to us. And I think it is sort of, for me, one of the guiding themes in my work as to how do we do the Great Commission in the 21st century. And Jesus said to go out and make disciples of all nations. And for me, all nations includes the digital world, and whether that is through specific social media platforms, through video content, through blogs, whatever it might be, but we can use online means as a way of creating disciples, building community, and sharing the gospel of Jesus. There is often the argument that social media is a very negative, narcissistic, vain, bullying, horrible place, and why should we be there? And I think as Christians, as churches, as organizations, as individuals, we have a responsibility in being salt and light in those places. Because if we aren't in there, then those places will get worse and worse. And, Jesus didn't just stay with the nice, shiny people who thought that they were the ones who sort of should have the first place to be with God, but he went and sort of spent time and hung around with the sinners, the sick people, those who society did not deem to be kind of acceptable. So I think that's the same. If we need to be in those places where society does not always think it is acceptable, in a acceptable place of being online. I'm not saying that we should go into other spaces. Anyway, if we think kind of even 20 years ago, but 50 or 100 years ago, of how far the churches, our local churches, or as individuals, as Christians, that we would reach, you're talking probably, your local community, your local town, maybe a few hundred, maybe 1,000, max in your reach. But now, not just the churches can reach thousands of people, but us as individuals, as social media users, can reach thousands, if not millions of people. We now can reach more people than ever before for effectively as little money as ever before, because using these platforms does not cost a lot of money to do. It does cost in times and sometimes resources, but actually it doesn't cost a lot to do it. So it's sort of the return on investment actually is quite powerful. But also we should be using communications to build relationships throughout the week. So it not just being about a kind of sell the Sunday and here's a live stream of the Sunday and that be it, but actually how can we build community? How can we build fellowship? How can we connect with the people throughout the week so that when we gather on a Sunday, whether that is online or on site, that we have those kind of deeper relationships already. Then, though it's not as nice to think about, we do need to think about the challenges. Because even though, as I said, it's practically free to do, it is not without its costs. Now, for big churches, it's all very well because you can have a paid person, you can have paid teams, you can have kind of people with designated responsibilities. And for smaller churches, charities, or organizations, it can be really difficult to set aside time, priority and attention, or teams to think about a digital presence. And often the big organizations have access to lots of different resources that make stuff look shinier or make stuff quicker. And that isn't always the case. And therefore it can become quite time consuming, thinking about, well, what content do we need to create? What are other people doing? How do I do this? I'm not as familiar with editing video. Oh, this is taking quite a long time to do. And it can be very frustrating and then very overwhelming. And even as a professional myself, I find it overwhelming managing the various platforms, thinking about different types of content, and having a plan, really thinking strategically, thinking, setting aside time and sort of prioritizing, thinking about your online presence will make it easier in the long run, rather than just trying to do it kind of ad hoc when you feel like you can fit it in on a kind of end of the day of a Friday, and actually you're back, or your creative juices are tapped out. So getting started, hang on 1 second, I need a drink. So getting started, this I would recommend, if you're able to set aside a day in sort of doing this, and there's so much more within sort of this slide, but it really helps to establish why doing online is important. because that will set the precedent, the tone, the direction, and the sort of effort then you put in, not just for yourself, but as your church or your organization, is thinking, why are we doing this? Why is this an important sort of avenue for us to be exploring? The first thing is building a comms strategy. Now, this is a guide for you and your teams that is particularly helpful when there are changes. And that might be changes in staffing, changes organizationally, of being able to reference back to this and go, okay, this is where our core language is, right? Well, how do we add this in? How do we change this? Or, oh, actually, we're changing directions in terms of our mission statement, right? How does our comms need to change in response to this? And because you've got it written down already, actually, it's so much easier to make these amendments. Or if there's new people to the team, that actually people understand, right, this is why you're doing it this way. Or if there's one person doing comms and then they leave, that actually suddenly the church is having to be left, they're from scratch, they're having now to start it. And actually then there's a lot of inconsistencies as it grows. It's also a guide for you when trying new platforms. So not many churches, I don't think, use TikTok or the new one of Threads. I mean, I'm all for trying new platforms out, but if you have a comm strategy and you've got the kind of direction as to how you're going to use different platforms, trying Threads, if you know how you use Twitter and how your language on Twitter or your tone of voice or the sort of messages that you put out on Twitter, actually because they're a similar platform, you can go, right, does this apply to Threads? Can I now, how does this work for this? Because you've got something already, rather than starting with a blank page of going, I don't really know what I'm doing on here. It does need to be accessible, used, and adapted where appropriate. So anyone within the church leadership or sort of a comms team does need to be able to access it so that they can reference things. But it also does need to be used. There's no point in writing it and then never looking at it. And it doesn't need to be overly complicated or big. 2 pages really, and if you're just starting out, is plenty. But you need to be thinking about, who are you? What's your organizational identity and brand? And that isn't particularly language that we use very often with churches, but thinking about, where is your particular heart for mission and ministry? Who are the partners that you, mission partners that you particularly give to? What is your brand? What is your colors? What are your logos? What is the kind of photos that you would use that is appropriately reflective of your church? Don't use stock images of lots of young, teenage, hip, cool people if actually your church is a lovely but traditional sort of rural church in the middle of Somerset where most people are over 50. Be honest about that, because actually the disingenuous sort of mis-selling will almost be more damaging than showing authentic pictures. Think about, again, so audience, who are your current audience? Who are the people that you are currently engaging with, whether that is your direct church family, your community, but who are the people that you want to reach with? So actually, if you've got a new housing estate being built, actually, do you think that you want to connect with them? So actually, maybe those are going to be younger families, or they're probably not going to be people that are the general demographic of your immediate community. Think about the platform. So once you've set who your sort of current and goal audiences are, what are the platforms that they use? What are the platforms that you currently use? What are you comfortable with? What do you kind of excel on within those platforms? What are you not familiar with, but what would you really like to try? And then thinking about your content pillars. So these are kind of the key themes, buckets of content that break down or it breaks down what your content is and helps you to pick it out. So thinking kind of educational, entertainment, promotional. And sort of if we think that a Sunday service is promotional, you don't want 90% of your content to be promotional. You want it to be kind of more 20-30%, but to have educational and entertaining things as others. Now, that's not to say it needs to be entertaining, but actually it could be some worship videos or some, we've compiled a worship playlist and breaking these down, but having set aside time to really think, well, what is the types of content that we could be sharing, helps you then, when we get onto it in a minute, of when it's actually writing out your content or thinking about what content you want to share, you've got these sort of buckets that you can pick from. And then when you're looking at your content plan of going, oh, actually, I've shared an awful lot of this stuff lately. Maybe we need to mix it up a bit. Maybe we need to pick from a different bucket. So the con strategy is really important. And I say it sort of take a day to think about it. Don't just do it yourself, do it with a team, whether that's church leadership, whether you get just sort of, I don't say some random people from the church, but get different people's input in this to really help you go, right, this is what will guide us. This is a sort of handbook of what we're going to be sharing, the tone of voice, the colors that we're going to be using, the style of photos, and what platforms we're going to be on. So if we then think about content planning, now this kind of looks a little bit overwhelming again, but thinking about what actually we're going to be writing out. Now, I like to think big and work your way down. So again, this kind of can be part of your sort of comm strategy day of have a kind of big calendar view of going, what's the year overview? What are the big days that we need to be thinking about? So obviously Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, Harvest, Remembrance. What are the big days, the immovable days within the calendar that we have? What are the certain maybe local events that happen every year, like Carnival or Christmas markets or something like that? What are the big things that are happening both within the church and the community? Because if it's community stuff, it's really good to engage with those sorts of things, but it helps you to think, well, we don't want to be trying to sell something else when it's Carnival week, because actually probably people aren't going to be thinking about anything else then. Then work down a little bit to quarterly and termly. So this now is thinking more perhaps of your church, of going, well, what events are going on? What sermon series have we got going on? What are, you know, if there are people on holiday that actually, you know, if ministers away on holiday that actually, maybe we don't need to shout about that, but we need to know that because it means that we've got to kind of think about some other type of content. You add in then the community events, your liturgical calendar, and even your church events. Then, so these are, I mean, these can just be like notes. It's not that you have to write in depth what it is, but just sort of, okay, these are things that we know that we've got going on. And then if you go into monthly and weekly schedules of going, right, this is the month coming up. So this is August coming up. So we need to be thinking about, and you do this sort of probably like a month before. So we do it kind of like early July time if we're thinking about August, of going, right, okay, well, the fact is it's the holidays, so we're going to be sort of perhaps toning down sort of a lot of the content because generally everyone's away, but we've got a lot of holiday clubs going on, we've got these activities going on, here are some community events that are going on. So right, so where do these all fit in that then we can sort of either post about, or we need to be aware of, or that we want to highlight, or that we want to follow up on after they've been done? And then schedule your content of actually going, right, this is the message, you know, for the next 4 weeks, or every Tuesday over August, we are going to be having a food bank, holiday club, focusing on holiday hunger. How do we write this in? You know, how do we apply it for the different platforms? And then thinking about then your different platforms. So actually, would Facebook language be slightly different to Instagram? Would a TikTok video be slightly different to a YouTube video? And you've got then all the different types of content forms. And really, it is important to mix it up. Don't post the same thing over and over again, but have, you know, long form content and short content, you know, little snappy tweetable kind of things. Have images and graphics. You know, don't just post one poster, a collection of them. Do videos of different types. Share links, post evergreen content that is less kind of topical, but that sort of more is like, here's a worship playlist. Well, anyone could see that whenever, because it's still, you know, it doesn't matter when someone sees that. Whereas something topical of come every Tuesday for our holiday club, that is irrelevant come September. And share other people's contents as well. So whether that's your diocese, your association, your circuit, whether that's national organizations, you know, share other people's contents. And to an extent, it can be helpful to kind of piggyback off trends because, you know, they're trending, and it can be a way of sort of highlighting things that are going on, or highlight, you can kind of, feed into. You can trigger, sort of make use of the algorithms of the algorithm promoting that content. I'm aware of time, so I will quickly move on. So then content ideas. So again, sort of like, what are the things that we need to be posting? So I've given a couple of examples already, but it doesn't always need to be Sunday centric. Obviously, that is a big part of who churches are, but not everything has to be come to the service, come to the service, come to the service, or only on a Sunday morning, here's the live stream. Do invite people, saying we're on site or we're online. There, we've got these different things, or, oh, this is exciting. We've got, we're looking forward to XYZ speaker coming, or we're looking forward to XYZ activity happening, and then following up afterwards on a Sunday of going, here are some questions that, that were asked from the service, or, here are kind of some key takeaways from it, because actually people don't have a chance to really talk about a service on a Sunday, discuss it. So giving people kind of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to go, have you thought about it? What are your answers to this? Because in asking a question sort of entices a response from your audiences. But then think about what's happening in the week. So if you are regularly running sort of a place of welcome, or community cafes, or in the holidays, feasts of fun and holiday clubs, drop-in services for other things going on, especially with the cost of living crisis, what are you doing to actively sort of combat these issues that people are facing? And whilst you can post loads and loads, and whilst, yes, it is appropriate and part of our job to share Christian content, it is really important to engage with our community, because actually it shows that we do care about the people around us. And so it can be quite fun, again, especially as we enter the summer holidays, of going sort of where, if you're recommending places for people to go, where's the best coffee, best place for coffee in town, where's your favorite coffee shop? And you could do a kind of weekly guess this spot of sharing a kind of like either zoomed in or something spot, and making people try to guess where it is. Supporting new businesses that come into your community. How amazing would it be if the churches were known for celebrating and highlighting and praying for and supporting local businesses that enter into our community, and sharing local charities and causes? And I know we're all sort of supporting lots of ministries, doing our own sort of charitable activities, but actually it can be a really encouraging way of supporting, of sharing, here is a local food bank. Okay, maybe we don't do anything with them, but they are doing an amazing job, and we just wanted to kind of say thank you for the work that you're doing over winter, because it's been a particularly difficult time. So then if we've got the what, the why and the what, who's going to actually be doing it? As I said already, often you are, smaller churches are dealing with they're not the sole comms person. They are someone doing a number of other jobs and ministries within a church, on top of probably a full-time job or other commitments and things. So building a team is really important, because it shares the load. It shares I don't want to say the burden of the creativity, but the responsibility of creativity, of sort of creating the content. But comms, whether that's in terms of creating, but also using it, the comms is not just for a few people in the church. It is for everyone. It is about connecting and communicating messages within the church. And therefore it should not just fall to one person, one or two people to do it. It should fall to everyone in the church contributing and responding to it. So the first thing is listening and prayer. Now, even if someone says, oh, I'm not really like a social media person, you can still listen, you can still pray. So what is your community saying? What are they really calling out for? Whether that is actually, we're interested in faith, but I don't really know what I'm doing, or these causes are really important to us, or we kind of don't know what's going on in the church because the doors always seem to be shut, or it's a big stone building that's very scary. But listening to what your congregation is saying, listening to what your community is saying, and praying about it. Where does God want to lead you in your comms, and not just sort of going for it just because, well, we should be on TikTok because everyone's on TikTok. Well, actually, maybe God doesn't want you to be there. Then thinking, people can find content ideas. So perhaps someone who is online a lot, maybe they don't really understand how the content is made, but I saw this thing on the Church of England's page, this looked quite cool, or this thing on Bible Society's page. They could look at what others are doing and finding them, and then just sort of pass them along, going, this was a really cool thing. This might be helpful for kids. This might be helpful for students or whoever, but actually just someone sort of who has the time of being able to just kind of look through various pages and profiles and websites of going, here are some resources that we could share out, but that they understand what is appropriate. So again, this is why they strategy is important, so that they can go, oh, I can see where the overlap here is. This is appropriate to share. Or if there isn't an overlap, maybe the messaging isn't, but actually the style's quite cool. Or actually, do you know what? No, this really isn't aligned. I'm not going to pass this on. And then the content creation doesn't need to be done by just one person. You might have, and I think this is very often the case, churches have people who are interested in photography and videography, but we don't ever talk to them. We don't ever ask them if they want to come and take pictures of the church. The only time you see them is possibly on the church fete or picnic or summer barbecue, where they have brought a camera and they take some pictures, and then you go, wow, they're really cool. And you don't do anything about it. How awesome would it be if we really encouraged and enabled and equipped people within our churches to utilize the gifts that God's given them to serve the church? Now, it's not that every week they need to be on photography and take pictures of the service, but actually maybe you could say, could you take some pictures of the church building? Could you take some pictures of the church leadership? Could you take pictures one Sunday so that we have some up-to-date, relevant, appropriate, but good pictures of our church family and, of seeing us in action? And the same for graphic design and writing. That actually, could we give people these jobs so that it's not falling on just you to have to take photography when maybe photography isn't a particular interest of yours, but we're really sort of like celebrating the gifts that our church family have. And then you can have someone else for social media management of scheduling and posting, responding. So whilst it can be helpful to schedule, it is not appropriate to just schedule and then never engage with people on your content, who engage with your content. And engaging with other accounts as well. You don't want people only to engage with you. You need to be liking and sharing and commenting on other people's posts. And also from a technical point, it is recommended to not have one person with to only have one person with access to social media or websites or email accounts and stuff like that, because God forbid something serious should happen, with the pandemic, you really don't know. But say something unpleasant happens and they leave the church very suddenly and they're the only ones that have access, and suddenly you can't get into your accounts, and actually they don't really want to be sharing. They don't want to talk to you, so they don't want to be sharing the accounts. Whereas if you actually give appropriately various people access, a handful of people, so that if you lose one person for some reason, that is not inaccessible to get into various accounts. And I say that from experience, both from myself and from people I've worked with, of going, oh, we can't get into this account because this person now has left. So it's just not that those people have to post, but, whether it's a deacon, elder, whoever, church leader, they have access. They don't have any responsibility to post, but they have access. So yeah. Then tools and resources. How do we do this? So this stuff could easily take a whole day. We could look into it, but if you have not already, would really recommend looking at the tool Canva for. It honestly is updating constantly, and there's so much that you can do. But graphic design, posters, flyers, slides. We've made this slideshow through Canva today. There are templates that you can use. You can copy other ones so if you've had a good poster before and you just want to update it, it's an amazing tool. And it is free to churches if you have your charity number to get the pro version. So I really recommend exploring that. There's so much that you can do in it. I don't use half of this stuff a lot of the time, but I'm constantly in awe. It's got some amazing AI features as well. Unsplash, Pixabay and Pexels are great for high quality graphics, but again, for high quality photos and visual elements. But again, don't you don't pick a picture because it looks cool if it is not authentic and honest about who your church is. But they can be great for backgrounds, or, you know, if you just want a generic, here's a Bible or here's some hands praying, they can be really good. Then you've got tools like Buffer and Hootsuite and the Meta Business Suite for scheduling. And I mean, Meta, you can do so much in it, but and then there's loads of others as well, but they're kind of quite good ones for scheduling in. So I think I'm hopefully on time. Things to remember: get support from your church, and that is in terms of creating content, you know, understanding who you are as a church, for your identity, for your comm strategy, but also when creating content. I don't think there is anything wrong. I don't know, some people might correct me. I don't think there's anything wrong in saying to your church one day, if you have a smartphone and you're on social media, we're live streaming today, please like and share the live stream. Like, everyone, we're just going to have 2 minutes, get it up, like and share it. Because how awesome would it be for, you know, 30, 40, 50 people to like and share their live stream? Okay, they're in the building, you know, watching the service, but actually the reach then for all of their friends to see it is amazing. Or if you've got a particular campaign or something that you want to highlight on social media, say to your church, please do engage with this, please like and share it, please do pass it on to other people, because it is so important that outside people see that the church family are engaging with what the church is sharing online. Otherwise, why on earth should anyone outside engage if the church family aren't going to? Do what you can. Again, if you're limited on capacity, resources, platforms, content, you know, don't feel that you have to be on every platform, because actually that is not. It's better to be on one or two and do it well than be on everything and sort of be very ineffective. But play around with them, have fun and experiment with the platforms, but do what you can really in your strategic work. It's social, not broadcast. So make sure to chat with your audience, or if you're live streaming, make a bit. I think a lot of people do now because of the pandemic, but still make an effort to sort of address certain elements to those who are online, because otherwise you just feel like a fly on the wall. You're watching something, as you don't feel very encouraged or engaged within watching it. I might not want to follow up further with this, but, you know, if people are asking questions on your social media platforms, or if they're responding to things, reply to that, engage with that. And even if people are writing negative comments, actually, maybe they're just hurting, and maybe it's an amazing way to engage with them and say, you know, can we pray for you? Or how can we help you? Is there something that sort of you're struggling with? And as I said, you know, try something, play around with it. But if it doesn't work, that's absolutely fine. You don't have to feel sort of committed to something. And you can just say, well, we tried TikTok. At the moment, actually, it doesn't work for us. It's always good to register with all the accounts so that you have your church's name, you know, have a consistency in branding and tags and handles. But actually, if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. You can just say, you know, at the moment, this account is unmonitored and we're not actively engaging on it. But at least try it, because you never know if you don't, you will never know if you don't try it. And then things to help. So I haven't finished it yet because I haven't put the slides in yet. So please don't go to it just yet. Like by lunchtime, the link will be live. I have done a page for Growing Good. So for this session, I've got links to content ideas, a content planner template, a strategy template, and on my website as well, there's various links to other webinars and things that I've done. I also will put the slides on there as well. I'm guessing Amy will send them out as well, but there will be that on my website. I also run with the Baptist Union a monthly free to attend webinar. It's an hour long on a Friday, the first Friday of every month, where we talk about various comms things. Again, I will link that on my website, but that is free for anyone to attend, and it's free to access the recordings from the sessions that we've done in the past on various comms things, from social media to thinking about listening, and we're going to be looking at safeguarding, and we've done mental health and various things like that. I also have a podcast called Gourds and Pomegranates that is common sense for church comms, and that is looking at various different elements of church comms from online and print and stuff as well. And then also there are cuff resources as well, which I'm sure Amy will touch on in a minute. But I think, looking at my notes, I think that's me done. I'm hoping I'm relatively on time.
You absolutely are. That was fantastic, Hannah. Thank you so much. We have now got a little bit of time for questions. You can see we've had a couple come through on the chat. If you're thinking of any right now, do pop them in or raise your hand and you can just unmute yourself and speak instead. But let's see what we've got. We had the question about free stock picture sites, which Hannah then did come to. We've had a couple of examples there. There was Pixabay, Unsplash. What else was there, Hannah? Was there another one? There was another one.
Pixabay, Pexels.
Pexels, yeah. They're all really good. Someone asked about, do you have a practical exemplar of comm strategy? Did you say, Hannah, that there's going to be a template one available on your website page?
Yes, yeah. So I'll do a template of like here, like just copy and paste this, and then you can input your own. I will put actually I have a sample one that I did for a recent say fake church. It was a fake church for a session I was doing. So I will make sure that is tidied up because we were doing it sort of live. But I will yeah, that will have examples on of the kind of things that will be in there. But yeah, there will be a
it's really helpful, isn't it, to see an actual example when we talk about these things as concepts. And like, okay, I'm getting an idea, but like, what does that actually look like when it comes to putting pen to paper? That can be a bit daunting. So that'd be really helpful. Thank you, Hannah. I had a couple of questions that I thought other people might have in their heads. So you touched on scheduling tools. So do they schedule your content to just go out on different platforms? Which platforms can you use them for? And when would it be a good idea to use a scheduling tool?
So Meta Business Suite will only schedule, I think, to Instagram and Facebook because that's what they own. Other platforms will, to a limit, because like you can have free versions and they'll do like 2 or 3 platforms. You can have paid ones and you can have kind of like 20 accounts and stuff. But they will post. So Buffer will post to, I think, all the standard ones. I don't think it posts like to YouTube, but then you can schedule within YouTube as well. And so I will focus on Buffer because that's what I use for one client at the moment, and it's very user friendly to use. And if you've got in your comms plan, we're going to say every Tuesday over the holidays, we've got a no, we wouldn't call it a holiday. We've got our Feast of Fun Club, which is open to anyone who wants to have some food, have some fun, and you know, just get to know who we are as a church family. You know, parents encouraged to stay as well. Now, if that's our kind of standard text, Facebook, that'd be fine posting on. Instagram, technically, that would be fine posting on, but you wouldn't want to focus on that because on Instagram, it's a visual focus because of the nature of the content. So you might just want sort of, if you've got pictures from last year, you know, put up a few fun looking kids, you know, or families having fun, or you could put kind of like the Feast of Fun graphic up and then do a slide with kind of you could do a carousel of a couple of other image graphics of sort of, here are the key dates, here is sort of some FAQs, but thinking as well that on Instagram you can't put a link in your text description. You'd have to go like link in the bio or link in our stories, and then you'd have to kind of like manually post that in every day, which is a bit of a pain. But then on Twitter, that probably what I said was too long to go in. So, okay, right, we need to like break that down slightly. So you could take those graphics that you made for Instagram and put them in, but actually, right, let's condense it down. But we can share the link in. So actually we can have kind of, you know, put a few bullet points and then put more information. Here's the link. But you could do all of this within Buffer, but because you've written your key text to begin with, that you can then tailor it for each of the platforms. And then either within Buffer, you can have preset your times. So Facebook, you only want to be posting like once a day, whereas Twitter, you kind of want to be posting a couple times a day if you have that capacity and that amount of content. So you could have you can have the kind of time slots, I suppose is the best way of describing them, that way you can literally click and drag them into different sections. And like Meta Business Suite will pick up, we'll look through the analytics of seeing when your content, when your audience is most likely to be online. So they will recommend certain times. But again, thinking about, well, who is your audience? So if your audience is mums and families, well, you probably don't want to be posting, you don't want to be sharing, oh, come along to Kids Club on that day between 7:30 and 9 o'clock, because they're not going to be looking at that because they're on a school run or they're getting the kids ready and stuff. So you want to be posting a couple of days before, thinking, well, this is our audience. Whereas if you're doing something for professionals, and it's sort of like, oh, here, register for this, or I don't know, here's this resource for something, actually posting probably between 7:30 and 9 might not be a bad time, because they're either commuting or they're getting ready, but they have that availability to look through social media. And likelihood is for younger people, younger generations, they will be on their phone whilst having breakfast, or well, hopefully not while they're driving, but traveling. So actually thinking about your audiences will inform. And I wouldn't say necessarily you have to be absolutely 100% directed by that, but it definitely can, again, guide you to, well, when really should we be thinking about posting?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess it's a lot about just experimenting,
Yeah.
thinking, common sense thinking, and then seeing what works. I like what you said about, if you write out your content beforehand, if you're, say, doing a Feast of Fun, just having a short paragraph about it written out so that you understand what it is that you're trying to convey, and then just using that for everything. So it's only one little piece of work to write that out, but then you can just say, Facebook might write that, just copy and paste the whole paragraph in. Twitter, you might only need a sentence. If you're on Instagram, it's more about the image and you'll just use the same caption again. So it's using the same thing over and over again. It sounds quite daunting, but actually it's not half as much work as you think once you get into
and it does save you time in the long run then, because then if you're doing something the next holiday, oh, well, we've pre-written that out. Actually, I can just change the dates on it, or actually that was really good for core text, I can just repost that.
Yeah, brilliant. We've got a couple more questions coming in. One is about, if you are starting from scratch, would you start with creating a website and use it initially just for promotional content? So I guess that's asking, would you just leave social media out of the equation at the start, I think, and just start with a website, or should you start with social media, or is it ideal?
I would say, in the first instance, have a website. And actually, I should have really said that in the content section. Your website is probably the most important place, because that is where you own that land. So if Zuckerberg decides that he don't want to do, I mean, he couldn't just sort of flip the switch and turn everything off. But if for some reason it goes down or something happens and social media stops, I will have a little cry, but you have no control over that. Whereas your website, I mean, granted, things can happen and websites can go down, but actually everything can be on there in a form that you want, and you're not limited to text allowance or certain formats of content. So have everything on your website within reason, but also make it accessible in finding certain information. So there are still some churches who have got kind of COVID rules going on, like because they've not updated it since 2020, or they've got come and join us for Carol Service 2021, and you're like, well, No, because we're much past that. If it's a recording or something, that could be quite nice, but actually, you don't need to have information that has passed. People want to know, is there parking? What's on during the week? Is it online or is it only on site? Can I watch this online if I'm wanting to try out church? What's your accessibility things? That is a huge thing that I think a lot of the time, because churches are old buildings, we kind of just go, well, this is how they are. We don't think about the needs of other people, of going, actually, do I have to climb a couple steps to go to the toilets? Is it a little bit, is it just not outside toilets, but is it outside in another building? Are people aware of how they need to come, not how they need to come into the building, but actually which door needs to be accessed via, or is the church office manned during the week if someone wanted to come and talk to someone, or telephone numbers, emails, I don't know, if someone needs help, where do they go? Or are there referrals to other things? So I think like having all of that stuff on your website is really important, because actually that is yours. I would say, if people are looking at a business, at a church or something, or a venue or something, they do tend to look on social media. So I would say make sure that your website has everything, but try at least one platform. I'd say go for Facebook, because that is the sort of general standard platform that people are on generally, I would say, though we're going kind of off that slightly now. But yeah, I think
possibly does it depend on audience as well? Like if you do have a slightly older congregation, I think people tend to be more on Facebook, and then the younger generations tend to be more on Instagram.
Yeah, but at least I just think Facebook is a good starting point, because it gives you the most amount of stuff for one platform. So at least having a Facebook page that has the bare bones. But yeah, if your platform, if your audience is more younger generations, millennials or Gen Zs and stuff, that you do want to be thinking about that.
Brilliant, thank you. Polly's also flagged up that this person could also look at creating a church profile on a church near you, if it's C of E church.
Yeah, that's very true.
Another question from someone: we have a parish with 2 churches. What is the best way of linking? One site or page with separate pillars, or 2 sites or pages but linked?
I have thought about this before, because this is something I have observed, and I am yet to have a firm conclusion as to what works, because I've seen it done poorly and I've seen it done well. I think probably in the first instance, it's easier to have one site, but have perhaps 2 pages within it of like, this is this church, here's the key information of this. But perhaps, leadership is the same, or perhaps events calendars works concurrently, but as in they work as one calendar as opposed to 2 separate calendars. But it's just then making sure people are highlighted as to which church. I would then say, though, see, for social media, it's a tricky one. If you're a small church on a limited budget and resources, I would say do one platform or one page, and just make sure that it's highlighted as to what's going on. But at least your feed looks bigger, because you're essentially got 2 different venues being posted about. But if you've got one where there is sufficient capacity to produce enough for each, or at least one, separate it, because at least then you're building a separate identity for them. It's not that within an organization as a church. But yeah, it depends, I'd say. But in terms of team and time, probably easier to have one that shares both messages, but just make sure that it is clear. So whether you pick one church has one color and the other church has another color, or key colors that are kind of, when something goes out, it's a blue one, that's this church, or it's an orange one, that's this church. So at least people have a kind of like visual indication which church you're talking about.
I like that, thank you. Just to flag that someone has put up very wisely on the point of when we're putting up pictures of people in our church on social media and on websites, just making sure that we're never posting anything without people's permission, and especially around children and safeguarding and vulnerable adults as well, making sure that we get the appropriate permissions and that anyone who is doing this for your church has done the appropriate safeguarding training and they understand about this. It's really important. Thank you for flagging that up.
Yeah. That's why that's why that having a designated day or something when you're when you take pictures, but at least giving people the warning, we will be taking pictures. If you don't want to be in them, or either you could have which is not nice to have kind of like, oh, we've got this corner of the church that's like we won't be taking pictures of, but at least people know that they're in a space where they won't be captured, or like the photographer knows, right, anyone who's in this place, they are not to be captured. But at least you're giving warning to people so that they are aware, and either they can share in an appropriate time. Actually, if they say they don't really want to be going, you just turn up and you go, we're taking pictures today, and you go, oh, I don't really know how to say I'm not comfortable with this, or actually this is not appropriate for my kids and stuff. So giving people warning when there will be there's kind of a special day for having photographs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so I mentioned earlier that this webinar is part of a series of 5, and they're all linked to the Growing Good themes, which is one of CUF's free resources for churches. We just wanted to tell you a little bit more about it as we're here, and I've got Polly, my colleague from CUF Church Urban Fund, to share a little bit about that now. So over to you, Polly, to tell us about Growing Good. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Amy, and thanks, Hannah. So yes, the Growing Good Toolkit is a 6-session course for churches. It helps churches to get to know their local community, to grow new connections within their community, to grow in faith and discipleship, and to make a difference where they live. It's based on the findings of a 3-year research project that identified the shared characteristics of churches that are growing through their engagement with social action and through their engagement with their community. And the 5 themes, or the 5 characteristics that were identified by the research, are presence, perseverance, hospitality, adaptability, and participation. And the research found that churches that share those characteristics, or that adopt those characteristics, are more likely to be thriving and flourishing and growing connections with their community, and therefore more able to make a difference. The Growing Good Toolkit is a free resource from the Church Urban Fund. All the sessions are available through the Growing Good website. We just ask you to sign up with your email address and a few simple pieces of information about you and your church. The sessions include a mixture of discussion, reflection on scripture, prayer. Each session has a film and some suggested activities. The sessions are really easy to prepare, and you don't need much time to prepare them before you run them. You don't need any previous experience in running small group sessions. We've tried to make them as accessible and as simple to run as possible. So if you wanted to think a little bit more about some of the topics that Hannah's touched on, so how can your church be a more active and a more visible presence in your community, online and digitally, but also through its physical presence, through the presence of your building, and through the presence of your congregation members within your local community and within local organisations within your community, then you might want to have a look at the present session, which is the first session in the toolkit. And churches that have used the present session have found that taking small steps can make a big difference. So we've heard from churches that have done things like considered the exterior of their church building and looked at how it could be better signposted, or how they could make it more obvious that the church is alive and active during the week, through better signage, or through tidying up the church grounds and making them more welcoming. So one church added a couple of benches to the outside of their church building and made it a space where people could sit and rest and chat and meet with others. We know that churches that have used Facebook to not just promote what they're doing, but also to connect with other organisations in the community and promote their work and their activities. We know that churches that have stepped out and done things like listening projects and community surveys to find out more about what's going on in their community and more about how the church could get involved in what's already happening. So in a minute, we're going to just watch a very short 1-minute film that gives you a flavour of the toolkit resources. If you're interested, head to the Growing Good website, sign up for free and have a look at the resources on there. So Amy, over to you. Let's watch the trailer together.
We all want our churches to grow, to be places where people of all backgrounds can belong, contribute and encounter Jesus, no matter where they are on their faith journey. And we all want communities of joy, justice and right relationships where the work of the Holy Spirit is evident. But how do we make that happen?
The Growing Good Toolkit is designed to help churches connect the dots between social action, discipleship and growth. Through flexible, interactive small group sessions, we will explore how our churches can be faithful and fruitful in our local communities. The Growing Good Toolkit is based on 3 years of research by Theos and Church Urban Fund. We've learned from over 60 churches, big and small, urban and rural, in areas of affluence and in low-income communities, and in everything in between.
As we journey through the toolkit, we will hear from Scripture, as well as research and stories from churches all across England. In our small groups, we'll learn from each other and consider what God might be calling us to do together. And we will pray, seeking God's wisdom and blessing.
God is at work transforming people and places. He's inviting us to be part of his story of transformation. Will you join us in Growing Good?
Thanks very much for sharing that, Polly. As Polly said, you can just go to the Growing Good website, which I will send to you in an email as well if you want to have a look at that free resource. So we're coming to the end of our time together now, but before you dash off, I just wanted to remind you about the rest of the webinars in this series. So they're all free 1-hour online sessions. You can come to one of them or you can come to all of them, whichever you feel would be helpful for your church. So we've got 3 more coming up after the kind of summer holidays when everyone seems to be off in August. So we've got one about volunteers and leaders of church-based social action projects, how we can be resilient when we are working so hard and seemingly without stopping on these amazing projects that we're doing. We've got one about adapting to our communities, church beyond walls, about really creative and different ways that we can do church, potentially outside of the church building, and engage with our communities in different ways. And then we've got one about recruiting, managing and retaining good volunteers. That's all about volunteer management. How do we make the most of all the skills and talents and passions that people have and help them to help our churches? So do sign up for those. Again, I'll send the link in the email where you can sign up for any of those if they seem suitable for you. So as Hannah mentioned, she's got some fantastic resources available on her own website. And I will send you a link to that in the email as well. So it's going to be a pretty jam-packed email. And I'll also send you the recording from this morning. And Church Urban Fund's also going to be producing in the next couple of weeks a bumper resource that contains all the information from today's session and signposts to lots of other useful resources about digital and being online and social media. It will be really useful to you. In the meantime, don't hesitate to get in touch either with Hannah or us at Church Urban Fund if you have any other questions or want help with anything with getting online or with growing good. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. We hope it's been useful and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye everyone.